So designing for humans in a digital world, innovation and intuition, the combination, it basically equals empathy. And I'm just going to go over the quick summary. So we're all leaders. We're all asked to design or create these innovative experiences, best-in-class experiences for our guests, new ideas that we haven't seen before. But the reality is that that really great experience and that innovation could be really miles apart. And finding the delta between what the guest is really willing to tolerate and what they're used to, it's really dictated by what they find intuitive. So walking into an atypical approach, I'm sure that you all have designed many experiences and products, but the typical approach, we've got intent, what's the goal, our research and data, build, iteration, which we could go into iteration on a different talk. It's without a lot of iteration, you're not going to have a great product. Prepare, get the teams ready, production, that confirmation of collaboration, and then you launch. But at first glance, it looks really good, but have we received the right information? So the next slide. These are just cute guys, but because I love them. But I really, the two most important things are basically research and data. Have we asked the right questions? And with our data, like, how do everyone gets a lot of data, but how are we really studying that data? And do we have the right people or data scientists letting us know what that data means? So a few things to watch out for. Analytics. So we know, it's like what we don't know. We know that someone did something, but we don't know why they did it. And that's a big gap. I think that when it comes to truly engaging our guests or our customers and moving beyond our typical set of analytics into their intent and their reasoning why they did something. I mean, they could have been swatting a fly and hit the CTA. Like, who knows? Next, anecdotes. So what we think we know. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't been at one company that doesn't use a lot of internal anecdotes as like data points. Like, no, this is the fact, this is the truth, this is what we're doing. Anybody have that experience? Yeah, a lot of shaking heads. So I think that when it comes to internal anecdotes, it's one of those things where there's a bit of danger in moving forward with a lot of that internal knowledge because it's somewhat tribal. It's been there for a long time. There is value in it, of course, because we're using our intuition and our best guesses as experts in the field, but it might be old data. It might be an anecdote that one of our C-class leaders is really driving as this is exactly what we need to do, and everybody has to follow suit. So it's important to keep a watch out for that. And then, good vibes only. I've experienced this, and I won't say where, but asking our best guests always. So we're reaching out to this community that loves us. They have such loyalty to the brand, and every experience, they're excited to share. Like they want to share all the time. They're always giving great reviews. They call in. They show up at any events that we have around the country. And what they say is that everything's awesome. And it's really hard to think about how to make things better for everyone else that isn't familiar with the brand, because you've got that, you're always acquiring new guests, and what the best guests may have gotten used to, there could be a giant gap between what we need to hear. So we need to make sure that we're asking the right questions and really opening up that pool when we're speaking to our users. Okay, so speaking to the core user, it's also important, and this is my belief that we'll never be that core user. So when we're designing that experience, it's like, well, I know everything about this brand. I know everything about the business goals, what the intent of this project is, what we expect success to look like. But we really need to keep our guest at heart, and not just that loyal guest I mentioned prior. We need to keep our future guests in mind. How are we always acquiring and creating awareness and really making the experience easy, free of distraction? So thinking in a more circular way, it's like we have to account for real life engagement. We could be dealing with a guest that is dropping off kids at school, or we could be dealing with a guest that is in a very sunny room that's trying to shop, and maybe something isn't very clear, the photography is not right. So really taking into account those real life engagements. And then the really important thing is that there's always more way to, one more way to solve a problem. I think one of the risks of, that legacy knowledge, or that those internal anecdotes or those experiences, sometimes that becomes fact, that becomes truth in our approach to designing digital products or services, and there's always a better way or a different way. So we have to really consider and plan into all those alternate paths, get out of that mindset of linear thinking. We're definitely going to strengthen the experience and broaden the experience and the success for the guests. So I mentioned it in the beginning. What's missing from that innovation and a little bit of that intuition? What's missing from the anecdotes and the analytics? We're missing empathy and really designing for that mental model. And I have a good quote on this next slide. So basically, mental models, from a guy that'll have to move closer to read the screen, but a mental model represents a person's thought process for how something works. They help shape actions and behaviors, influence what people pay attention to in complicated situations, like a sunny environment, like a basketball game at the end of the day, like 5 minutes in between a meeting. So how are we really paying attention to those complicated situations and designing into those problems? And that was Yazin Akawi in Inc. magazine recently. It's a really good article. I recommend looking that up. So when we're truly designing with empathy, it's bridging the gap between that innovation and intuition. And we should be inspired always to think of a new way to speak to our guests and reach our guests, and really think about how are they approaching this journey? What is their experience like wherever they are, whatever mechanism they're using? So think about your features, think about the experience as a whole, and edit. Everything has to have a human reason for being there. I think one of the challenges, I was talking about day-to-day and just real life engagements, and people are distracted, and our phones are so distracting, and there's so much happening all the time, whether you're working and taking care of the kids, or whether you're trying to multitask at work, or you're sitting out in the park. We have very short attention spans. I don't know if anyone's heard the fact that goldfish seem to have longer attention span than humans, which is not that inspiring, but maybe that is a good data point when we're designing for our products. So I've worked with a lot of different teams, and it always, everything looks great on a whiteboard. You go through those sessions, you've got your Post-it notes, you have your business goals, you have, maybe the sprint was just super successful, but maybe too quick. And maybe we're designing for that best case scenario always, like no bad actors, nothing, like they're gonna do everything perfect. So, David is gonna do everything perfect, and Inbar is definitely gonna do everything perfect because he's taking notes. But we're not designing for the off-script behavior, what I just mentioned. We're not designing for those real life moments, and just that attention span that we really have to keep in mind. So that kind of comes down to just intuition, and at the end of the day, the success of all of our products and our experiences and our building loyalty with our guest, it all needs to go down to something very simple, something very intuitive, and remember that we only have a very short time to capture that guest's attention. If they have a great experience in a short time and they accomplish their goals, however they get there, which we should be thinking about that, that path, not the linear, but the multiple ways in, they're gonna come back. And what they find intuitive, they're gonna find easy. What they find easy, like, there's your loyalty. But the features and the tools that aren't used, they do a couple things. They confuse our guest, and I think I've downloaded almost 75% of, well, not 74%, maybe 75% of the cool apps on iTunes, or the ones I'm interested in, and I have 500 apps I just don't end up using because they looked really good. They look like they could help me. They look like they had these products or features that would really either plan my day, give me a better path on a bike ride, whatever. But we're really spending so much time on this overdevelopment and kind of overthinking the experience on what the guest could need or would need, or maybe if they did this, they might like this, and if they engage here, then what's the next step? But some of those features are never going to be used, and they slow down the time that we actually get product to market. A couple little examples, and it's because it's difficult if we're speaking to leaders, creatives, product designers. When there is so much that we can do, and it's exciting. And when you think about, this is a completely new experience, and they're gonna love it, and it's something that they've never seen before. But when you provide so many options, you're over designing, and you're also not accounting for that time that they need to learn all those new tools and new features, and it's definitely a risk. So the message here, keep it simple. I love this little guy. He's super simple. Rate your experience. But it's really editing, and it's removing obstacles, and it's thinking about every single piece. It's thinking about all of the colors. It's thinking about your photography. It's thinking about how many steps and it takes for them to be successful. So social science, super important, obviously, to take into account when we're trying to create these innovative experiences. We need to know more about our guests. we need to know more about people in general and how they are engaging. It changes every single day. We can have an article come out today that is, just sounds great, and we've figured out the guests. We know how they're engaging. In general, whether it's insurance or banking or retail, but we really need to remember to constantly listen to the guests, get their feedback. There's so many great services out there that you can test your product in before it reaches the guest. And we're not going to hire ethnographers. Or maybe some of you have. Who has an ethnographer on staff? Oh, okay. So let's talk. That'd be really interesting to hear about. So, but again, that doesn't mean that we all have the resources to hire ethnographers. But we can begin kind of in that mindset. So, they're studying people, they're studying their behavior, they're studying their culture, they're studying, what language are they using, what products have they been using, what are they used to, what kind of environments are they in, and it's kind of that basic place to start. Oh, mentioned that one. But what are the assumptions that they might have? The vehicle in which they're engaging. Are they on like mobile, desktop? Are they in store? Is it a cool store experience? Where is their journey beginning? What mindset might they be in? Are they super aggro because they just got off, the 520 and, I guess it'd be the I-90 since it has more traffic. Did we send them there or did they get there on their own? So really keeping their mindset in mind is super important. This is supposed to be live, so I'm going to blame the Wi-Fi here. But what kind of questions should we be asking with empathy in mind? And this was going to be a text-in, but I'll just ask to raise hands. What other questions should we be asking ourselves when we're designing experiences?
So the big debate that's going on in the user experience community sort of at large right now, this is happening on Twitter, this is happening at conferences, is designing, how do we really design with empathy? And one of the conclusions that people are reaching is that if you want, if you get somebody who is either representative of your user base or part of a marginalized community on your design team, instead of trying to build sort of artificial empathy. But my thinking on this is always, the questions we should be asking are the questions that we ask in, there's a microphone. Everybody can hear me, right? The questions that we ask in user research and user-centered design, like think out loud, tell me about your experience, tell me, what you're happening, that, tell me what's happening when you try to use this thing, tell me what frustrates you, tell me, what your goals are, like what are you trying to accomplish and get out of this experience, I think just, it sounds kind of sort of maybe reductive, but just going back to the basic user experience techniques,
absolutely.
Those are the right questions, and we've been asking them in that part of the practice for 30, 35 years now. Anyway.
Anyone else? Oh, good.
Not to kind of dodge the question, but I almost wonder if you go back to, do you have the right personas when you're asking these questions, keeping empathy in mind? Because if you leave one of those marginalized groups out of your personas, you can't ask the right questions and have empathy if you left out a marginalized group to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
You get to personas with user research.
Exactly. And Danielle, we have lunch coming up. I know that. So, but it's anyone else? Oh, pardon.
So I work on accessibility for people with disabilities, and one of the things that we find is challenging in design is that it's very difficult for people who don't have exposure to that population to build that empathy. And so sometimes having someone on your team, I mean, that's great if you can do it. But that's a heavy lift. You have to head count, all that. it's the best way to do it. But if you can do user research that includes people from marginalized populations, and then let them talk.
Yeah.
Don't assume that you know the answers. And one of the things that we've done is to go to conferences where people with disabilities gather and just hand them your phone.
And I'm sure voting didn't come up in that conversation. Like, if people can't get to the polls, and there are some.
Doesn't come up for Starbucks.
Yeah, yeah, but that's a great point, Cynthia. Thank you, and Bran. Anyone else? Oh, good.
Why? Just ask why.
Yeah.
All the time.
And I think that's what, going back to the basics that Bram had mentioned, exactly, ask why. And not only why are we doing it, but why do they need it, and what can we do to make it better? And it seems so simple, but people's lives change every day, and they're experiencing new products every day, and what we might think is great for them is just, it could be outdated. And so sometimes that going back to the why regularly and just asking the simple questions, it doesn't need to be any more than that. It could be. But any other thoughts? Oh, yeah.
I think if you're asking questions, that implies that you're in a kind of a test environment. You've got them out of their habitat.
Yeah.
You've got them in your usability lab. So
Yep.
a lot of variables are isolated.
That is such a great point. Yeah.
So what that means is you're not able to observe who else is impacted by me doing this.
Absolutely.
So you might ask, hey, is there a kid in the backseat screaming? Is your mother not taking her meds? Who else is impacted? Things you can see by going in their habitat. So if you're asking.
And that's such a great point. UX labs, lovely, but they are in a contained environment. They're comfortable. They've been seated, and they have a glass of water, and they're kind of guided through what we would like them to do. But it's kind of like going back to your best guest. You're framing up a really great experience for them, knowing what you want them to do, and you're in the back. You're like, push that button. Like, I can't find it. But that's a really good point. Yeah, and that's empathy. That's really thinking about how would they engage with this product if they're worried about a family member, or if they're late to pick up the kids, or if they just slammed their finger in the door a couple weeks ago. That's a great point. Okay. So what are getting into some of the specifics, we're talking about mindset, and we're talking about where they are and how they're engaging, but what are some other things to talk about and bring up that could be, color, sound, when it comes to, accessibility and whatnot. So number of steps, is it relatable? CTA style, like how many CTA styles are there right now? It's bananas. Is yours consistent? So this was another poll. So what are some other considerations? Just like one word answers or two.
Cultural context.
Oh, absolutely. Is it relevant for them? Yeah.
Because I had an interesting conversation. I originally came from China.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about e-commerce website in UIs or the Western world. We tend to design simple experience with less distraction.
Yep.
But if you go to a Chinese website, you find they're very full. A lot of things going on there. It's usually not considered as intuitive, not a good design. But truth or not, the Chinese customer got used to that. And if they're presented with a much simpler website, they're kind of trying to figure out what's happening. Or is the website doing something?
Absolutely. And
so that doesn't mean the design will have to be always busy with a lot of information, but I think the designers or the product manager really need to consider that kind of content.
And it's interesting to see. I'm glad you mentioned that, because you look at some of the forms of media where we are reaching the guest. There's awareness, where there's retention. Say a catalog or a magazine. A Chinese catalog and magazine is going to look very different as does a Japanese magazine. It is, it's packed. There's a lot of information, and then you look at some of the vehicles that we have, and they have been designed to be much simpler. Danielle.
I don't know the most concise way to say this, but making sure everyone feels welcome. REI is going through a big thing right now with plus-size women, that now they're providing clothing for them in their stores, and they felt very marginalized and they weren't important because they didn't have clothes for them. So in your ads and what you're displaying online in your website, make sure that you're including people with disabilities or people of different sizes and things like that, or you're going to marginalize that group.
And that includes, down from the photography to the messaging, really being considerate and empathetic towards the guest, not just this persona or this, idea of a guest. Ours is, at Tommy, it's, they are 45 to 64 plus, and they all have, a bit higher income, but it's one of the things that I'm glad we have a lot of that data, but we aren't considering the guy that, not to be insensitive, but maybe the guy that hates his job and he looks forward to, that 1 week in Florida where he can put on his, camp shirt and it's silk and he feels good and he is having his moment. He's looked forward to this all year long. It's not just your, 200 plus guys with boats and, second homes. It's a much bigger audience for sure. Well, hey, I wanted to thank everybody for being here. I had a great time, and after cameras cut, I was just thinking about this last time. We have these lunches, but we all have each other's names on the email. It'd be great to connect with a lot of you in lunch, coffee. I think it's something that, we're all here, we're in Seattle, we should do more often. So, anyway, thank you.